Hello, everybody. So, question of the day is: should single women revisit their standards in men as they get older? Should we, if you have a list of standards that you're looking in men, as you get older, should you go through the list and see if everything on your list is realistic? If everything on your list makes sense? If everything on your list is fair? And what are you seeing right now? Since you made the list, look on the list, what have you seen so far? How many people have you met? How many people have you dated that actually met stuff on your list? And how many had they been? So my answer to this question is yes. Why? Because me personally, in my 20s, I had a long list. There are things on my list that said there was a first thing on top of my list was I wasn't going to date or marry anybody who had kids. I wasn't going to date or marry anybody who was more than 5 years older than I was. I don't know where that came from, but I had it on my list. I wasn't going to marry or date somebody who was married before. So these are things on my list in my 20s. And those that I wanted a perfect guy with, fresh from no drama, no kids. So that's what I wanted. Those were on my list. And I looked through it and, some things that you see and nowadays it makes you laugh. So, and then I still, in my late 30s now, I have a friend of mine, I think last year or the year before, I had a friend of mine who were going through my list. We were talking about how difficult it was to find, a husband because obviously I'm still single, right? A good guy. And I was giving him the stuff on my list. And he was like, first thing first, the first thing on your list, these three things. You have to revisit this, right? You have to cross this out, right? He said it's not possible for you to say you cannot marry or date a guy who has a kid when you have a kid yourself. You see? So we put things down without even thinking. When I put those things down on my list, I had a kid at that time. But I didn't think about it. So sometimes it's important that we kind of maybe read your list to somebody, like a guy, maybe a good friend of yours, and they might help you, get reality. So he was like, you can't do that. And plus, most people now are divorced. Most people are married. If you want a mature man, most of them are divorced. So you really can't say you have to marry a guy who has not been married before. So I have to cross that off. And then he was like, you can't really say you cannot marry a guy who's, 5 years older than you are because you want them to be older than you are. So that is crossed off my list. So I didn't just cross it off because he told me so. I crossed it off because I thought about it and revisited it. I'm like, yeah, he's right. And also I have to look at it and say, so far, what have I seen so far to say that, these should stay? These stuff on this list should stay. What should I do? And should I really keep this? Should I go based off my experience so far? So I'm saying, yes, ladies, we have to revisit our standards in men as we get older. And just look at it. Read it out loud. Read it with your girlfriend. Or if you have a good, man friend, read it with them. And let them, guide you and see if everything on your list is realistic. If everything on your list makes sense. If everything in your list makes sense to you. Or even if it's fair. And then look at the rest of the stuff on your list and compare it to what you see nowadays to see if there is an adjustment needed. for your standards. Amen. So we have to do we have to do that, unfortunately. So will you join me in revisiting our standards and thinking through them and rearranging them? Will you join me?